So moving on to the next lovely set of games.
The
Group
group that makes me
C.
cry.
Yeah, this is the group that is just that everyone claims they want to talk about, because this is in many ways most interesting, but in other ways kind of let down by one of the participants that could have made it more interesting, right? So, what are your takes on Fnatic? I don't know how much Fnatic you watched leading up to this event.
So I haven't watched a ton of Fnatic. From what I saw from them, some of their troubles were that they tended to split the map really definitively. So they'd over focus basically on one side or the other, which is why I forget whether it was in a conversation with you in the press room or whether I actually said it in the last making the rounds we did. I think it was a press room conversation actually. But that's why I really like for example, Nemesis on champions where he can affect side lanes, like the Twisted Fate. I think that's a great pick for Fnatic because it covers up the fact that they do tend to split the map so like definitively in terms of their focus. Now I know that the thing that they've been criticized for the most has been their drafting around non-standard bot lanes, and I think that they kind of got like when RNG banned Yumi, I was like, wow, they're actually doing Fnatic a favor. And then Fnatic locked in this Morgana Blitz bot lane where you made the point that they really do like to save support counter pick for Ming for a lot of reasons. But because RNG is a very bot focused team, right?
Right.
And I know talking to RNG, they actually said one of the reasons why they played out the game so cautiously is because they weren't sure what Fnatic's composition did. Like they weren't sure, like, oh, okay, like how are we going to play around this? Which is why, like you saw when they were setting up for team fights, they'd kind of take their time to make sure they were in the best position possible to attack Fnatic, and then they would go in. Like you could see it in their setups. It's actually really nice. But I still like maintain that despite Fnatic's issues, I still do believe that you put them in a different group and they probably look better. I don't think they're nearly as bad as people are saying they are. Like I was surprised when people were making like the EU teams meme and Fnatic was the blank spot because I still think they're a better team than say like Splice, for example. But yeah, I think because this is such a competitive group, and RNG and SKT are both looking really strong. I think they've put themselves in a really difficult position now. Because just mathematically, like that game against RNG was so important for Fnatic. And they kind of, I think, lost sight of what they wanted to do as an entire composition in drafting. And it just did not work. And it's going to be difficult for them to recover from.
Let's bring back the 0-4. Woo! 0-4 comeback. Let's do it again. Fnatic. I agree with you on a lot of those levels. I also think that they're playing poorly individually though. I've seen a lot of kind of like, yeah, there were times where they executed their composition in a way where we're using all of our protective abilities on our key targets, but there were also times where it's like, all right, well, I guess Morgana Black Shield is down now. Or, or just like really weird things happening that made no sense. RNG had to breathe basically to bait out an important skill and then they could just win the fight. So it feels like not only are their compositions and drafts really weird, but they're misexecuting them also to the extent that they can be executed correctly. So I think that's a thing. Also, my big gripe with Fnatic isn't Garen Yumi because they brought out the Garen Yumi, and Garen Yumi is useful to them in certain ways because they can play globals with it, right? They can play globals with the Yumi, and that still gives Hillsong agency, which is why like TF Yumi comps are actually really, really annoying to deal with. TF Nocturne comps are really annoying to deal with, but some of the drafts that they're coming out with the Garen Yumi are really low range drafts, no real siege potential or anything along those lines, and they're just not. It feels like Garen Yumi, you have to get to a point where Garen Yumi is already a meatball frontline without anything that he's necessarily frontlining. And then he's supposed to hold midsection in 1-3-1 setup, but lanes are behind or lanes aren't winning the way that they're supposed to, like the Gangplank versus the Akali, stuff like that. So there are just a lot of problems with Fnatic right now. And usually in the past, when they've made comebacks from bad starts or when EU teams seems to be very fashionable, have made comebacks from bad starts historically, they've had like a very clearly terrible read on the meta and haven't necessarily been performing just god awfully individually. Now, of course, there are some exceptions, but I still think that that's like, for me, the fact that they have like not one but three different things wrong with them is more damning than anything else. That said, I think the schedule favors them in terms of momentum. So that could actually end up being a key thing in a group like this. RNG versus SKT is going to be a hard matchup, so that could easily kind of affect the tone of the rest of the day. Obviously, a lot of the players involved are very veteran players. They're used to these types of situations, so maybe they'll be like a little bit more even-keeled than you would think, but that Fnatic gets to play clutch. So that could easily put them in a situation where Fnatic are able to gain some momentum. Maybe SKT are just like surprisingly shaken up by RNG or something, and then they start to be SKT, or maybe that means that like RNG are thrown off and then they lose to clutch. All of these scenarios are very possible in this type of format, and I think that that's what makes it really exciting for fans, but also really frustrating for people like us. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing I wanted to mention about this group is that I'm pleasantly surprised to see SKT, and I'm not going to say they've executed everything they've tried like to the best that it could be executed, but I'm really pleasantly surprised to see some of their drafts and some of the takes that they've had in this group thus far, because they've done a few things that I didn't expect from them, and executed them, I guess, better than, like, I know that sounds a bit off, but like traditionally SKT has really stubbornly stuck to the style that they've wanted to play, and I did like their adaptations against Fnatic, and I also liked, despite the fact that I do think they should have lost that RNG game.
It took them like 30 minutes to figure out what their comp does. Nice.
Yeah. I did, like, I appreciated the direction that they went in, and I appreciated that they also had Faker being able to make that call, because typically it's not something we've necessarily seen from SKT, certainly not recently, and I think it bodes well for them moving forward. Where the one thing I was worried about with them is that they would come in and kind of, because it's a bigger stage, they would, I guess, be a little bit more passive is so like overused. And try, like, they kind of retreat into what's always worked from them in the past, I guess. And that's not necessarily what we've seen. So
I think a big factor as to why people refer to SKT as sort of a slow starting team is that they're usually not super well scouted, or they at least give the impression of being not well scouted in terms of not really drafting things out of their comfort zone and drafting things to counter their opponents. Instead, they just kind of like come playing their game, picking their things, banning things they don't want to play against. But both of these drafts seemed very targeted.
Mhm.
So I think that that's, and by both of these drafts, I mean RNG and
RNG and Fnatic,
Fnatic.
yeah.
I honestly, the one game I haven't watched really at all is SKT Clutch. I'm just gonna throw that out there. But I heard that it was a complete and utter disaster for Clutch, so it's not too surprising. I think that, so for me, that's the big surprise from SKT. I thought that if SKT continued to play the way that they did, they were actually in danger of not getting out of this group, and I didn't predict that they wouldn't. So I think from that perspective, I'm pleasantly surprised by SKT. I still think I see a lot of chips or chinks in their armor where it's like,
Mhm.
all right, it takes us 30 minutes to figure out this comp. Okay, even though we have this game plan against Fnatic, figures Tristana goes 9-0 when he's not even that great at Tristana. So, yeah, this is it's pretty interesting to see. So, like, I get this feeling that maybe if they're still able to win with those limitations, they're much stronger than I anticipated. So that's pretty cool. Like, I'm in favor of kind of big dominating giants coming over from any region because I think that those are like really impressive teams. So
Yeah. Who did you have initially getting out of this group? Because
Fnatic and RNG.
I had SKT Fnatic.
I had
Okay.
Fnatic and RNG because I thought that SKT got put into a group where the other two kind of strong teams matched up stylistically well against them, and RNG got placed into a group where they have no business actually getting out of groups with two really strong favorite level teams normally, but stylistically they're super good against Fnatic because Fnatic rely on Hillsong to kind of roam. And they're super good against SKT because if SKT can't hold midsection easily, then Khan will inside lane. So that's why I felt like, and you saw like Khan wasn't the player they were kind of relying on because they couldn't get mid control, whereas Faker is like much more aware of the timings, like when he can push certain advantages. He was the one that they relied on to get the picks on Longxi, so that was like kind of their adjustment and their adaptation to the situation that they found themselves in. So I thought that that was cool as well. But that's why I thought it's like, oh, okay. I legit published an article that said like SKT's group of death is RNG's group of life because it's like, all right, RNG has really no business getting into quarterfinals, but they probably will. So
Yeah. I initially had SKT Fnatic based on, again, like in a group like this where three teams, in my opinion, really deserve to make it, and I'm still really mad that not all of them are going to. I think that I do think there's a scenario where momentum can favor Fnatic, but based on the way the group has shaken out thus far, going forward, I would say it's going to be SKT RNG.
yeah, and again, the only reason why I would even give Fnatic a little bit of credence is because, well, I guess two reasons. One, but it's like kind of the combined two reasons. It's the format and like a history of there being teams that completely get their shit together in a remarkable way. Unfortunately, there's only one day off. Technically, like 2 days off for them because, or 3 days off, I guess. So maybe a little bit of an advantage. So that's kind of cool. I think it will be SKT RNG though, most likely.